this is a very unique program about the Summit of the Americas. We will, by the end of the hour, we will know everything we need to know about the Summit of the Americas with our special guest, former U.S. Representative Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. Before we begin, a few notes to share. What we do and how we do it and why we're successful is because of our members. We appreciate those who are members of the World Affairs Council. If you'd like to get involved, please click on the link that Samantha's posting to learn more about membership opportunities. We do have another program next week on the history of genocide at the Holocaust Museum, one of our recent partners. So please tune in to learn about that. The link of that program is in the chat room, and that will be an in-person event at the Holocaust Museum on the history of a few genocides. We're not covering all of them, but several important ones. If you have questions, please put them in the chat or Q&A. We will keep track of that. I want to thank our friends at the Fulbright Association of San Antonio for helping us promote. Dr. Gwynn, thank you, at UIW. And of course, our friends at World Affairs Council of Miami, who have also helped promote this. And last but not least, our board members, Sherry Dohlat Shahi, who has been very instrumental in engaging us with very vibrant programs like this one, who is with the city's Global Engagement Office, Ambassador Luis Moreno, who is on our board as well, and John Casey for helping to include us in this program. And finally, last but not least, Congressman Joaquin Castro, who's a good friend of the council and who suggested for us to partake in this program. So thank you all. And now I want to introduce our guest. You will find her complete bio in the chat room, but just some key notes about former U.S. Representative Debbie Mucarsel-Powell. She's the special advisor to the president for the Summit of the Americas, which is going to take place in Los Angeles this year. Congressman Mucarsel-Powell made history as the first South American born member of Congress that flipped a diverse majority-minority South Florida district in 2018. She has over 20 years of experience providing strategic policy, fiscal, fundraising, and operational leadership, not only in the in the public sector, but also for nonprofits as well, an area that is dear to us. As the first and only Latina Democrat to ever represent the congressional district in Florida, she led the charge to support Venezuelans fleeing their country through securing temporary protected status and providing humanitarian aid and other types of aid to the Venezuelan people, something I know our local Venezuelan community in San Antonio will appreciate. She has also authored legislation providing funding for mobile COVID-19 testing, extending Medicare coverage for COVID treatment. Very importantly, created a national peer support warm line under the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration to address something very important, especially recently, addressing rising mental health concerns. She's a tireless advocate for the Hispanic community, women and girls worldwide, has chaired a Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and she was tapped to be a senior advisor to the Giffords to work on ending gun violence. If you're tuned into MSNBC, CNN, Telemundo, she's always provides commentary and analysis on the national front. A fellow at the Graduate School of Political Management at George Washington. Congresswoman Mucarsel-Powell lives in Miami, so I know she knows a thing or two about arepas and can recommend us for sure to some places in Miami. Welcome to San Antonio.
Well, thank you so much, Armin, for such a kind introduction. I want to just first let you all know that I have had San Antonio and the people of Texas in my thoughts. Like you mentioned, I've worked on gun violence issues for many, many years. It's actually a personal issue for me. I lost my father to gun violence. And so I just wanted to start with that this tragedy in Uvalde has affected not only Texans, but I can tell you that many, many Americans, and here in Miami, because of what we went through in the Parkland massacre. So my thoughts with all the families and with everyone there in Texas. Thank you for introducing me, for having me. You have a great congressman there. Representative Joaquin Castro is a dear friend, and I've seen him, how he works, and he always puts the interests of his constituents first before anything else, before politics. And you really are fortunate to have such a great representative there. As you mentioned, the Summit of the Americas is taking place in Los Angeles next week. We're really, really excited. And it's important to everyone here in the United States, because as you can imagine, the United States shares a deep historic and cultural ties with all of the Americas. And this is particularly true for all of you who live in Texas, which has had Spanish-speaking communities for hundreds of years, and for San Antonio, the largest majority Hispanic city in the United States. But this is also true across the nation, where families, universities, cities, businesses renew our connections and make a better future for our families and our children by having these ties with the region. I'm extremely honored to answer the call by President Biden to serve as the White House Special Advisor for the Summit of the Americas. This is the highest regional multinational event that we're hosting here in the country. And as the firstborn Ecuadorian immigrant who was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, this call to serve as a special advisor really speaks directly to me. The summit, like I said, occurs every 3 to 4 years, and it convenes all the heads of state from North America, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. It also brings together members of the private sector, civil society, and young Americans in the hemisphere. As you know, the United States is hosting for the second time since the first summit in 1994, when we had the inaugural Summit of the Americas here in Miami. We are really facing a lot of challenging issues, as you all know, but this includes Central America, Latin America, and the Caribbean as well. We have lived through the COVID-19 pandemic, which exposed health, economic, and educational, social systems, all the cracks that we have in our systems. We are right now facing a threat to our democracy and democratic institutions. We are every day facing tougher challenges as it pertains to the climate crisis. And we have seen how a lack of equitable access to economic, social, and political opportunities are really affecting citizens all over the hemisphere. The theme for the summit, Building a Sustainable, Resilient, and Equitable Future, puts forth an ambitious and a positive agenda for the summit. We are going to be announcing 5 political commitments under 5 areas, which directly are going to face the challenges that will set us path for a better future. The first area is the economy. Understanding the connection between the region's success and our own, the president will use the Summit of the Americas to align regional leaders, the private sector, and civil society behind a new and an ambitious economic agenda for the region. Closely tied to his economic agenda, the president is also going to roll out his vision for tackling the historic migration crisis that we've seen in the hemisphere. You know, maybe better than many people, that we are seeing millions and millions of migrants that are coming into the United States, but they're also moving throughout the hemisphere. And this is due for many reasons, including lack of economic opportunity, insecurity, repression. Over the last few months, the president has mobilized leaders around this region particularly to set forth a bold new plan that will be centered around putting the responsibility, sharing different lessons that we've learned across the hemisphere, and providing economic support for the countries who have been most impacted by the refugee and migration flows. Part of that bill that you mentioned, Armin, that I passed in Congress was to provide actually resources, as a lot of countries in South America faced a huge inflow of Venezuelan migrants in 2019 and 2020. On the margins of the summit, the president is going to join with different heads of state to sign a migration declaration, sending a strong signal of unity and resolve to bring the regional migration crisis under control. The third area, health. We need to ensure that millions of Americans, and when I say Americans, I mean North Americans, Central Americans, South Americans, don't continue to die from COVID-19. This is a top national security priority. The United States has donated 70 million vaccines to the hemisphere without any strings attached. At the summit, the president will also launch an effort to promote health systems and health security in the region to prepare for future pandemics, to strengthen the region's health systems, and to bolster health security supply chains. The president is also going to announce next week an ambitious new partnership on climate and energy with Caribbean nations, which is led by Vice President Kamala Harris, in order to respond to the increasing climate and energy challenges that are facing our Caribbean nations. Finally, the issue of food insecurity is incredibly important, and its effects on vulnerable populations. This is a regional priority, and it's directly linked to our cooperative efforts on migration and ensuring an equitable and sustainable driven economic and pandemic recovery in the hemisphere. We have invested in key social safety nets to help reduce poverty and food shocks in the region through Feed the Future and other agricultural programs. The United States is proud to contribute more funding for migration and food security that needs to improve the quality of life for people across the region. So through the summit processes, all the countries, not just the United States, but all the countries participating will commit to improve the lives of the people of the hemisphere. We need to make sure that everyone works together on strengthening democratic governance, improving health and pandemic resilience, building a green and equitable future, facilitate clean energy transitions, and expand our region's digital transformation and access to innovative technologies. You know, I want to mention how important digitalization is to advancing inclusive economic prosperity. 30% of the citizens living in the hemisphere still don't have access to affordable, accessible internet connections. And we know that that limits employment opportunities, it restricts their access to the information they need to thrive, and it cuts them off from participating in critical parts of the economy like e-commerce. So the summit is really going to provide an opportunity to grapple how we will responsibly bridge the digital divide. If done properly, expansion to 4G and 5G technologies, as well as new tools like satellite internet, can promote economic prosperity, especially for vulnerable and marginalized groups. Taken together, these summit commitments, democracy, health, clean energy transition, climate, and digital transformation will promote an economic recovery and enable democratic governments in our region to deliver on the promises of inclusive and sustainable prosperity. We want to make sure, and it's the priority of all of us working at the summit, that we host the most inclusive summit of the Americas, bringing not just the heads of government, but also people, businesses, and the Americas together to directly have these dialogues. I'm very much looking forward to working together, not just with the government leaders, but also with independent civil society activists and young visionaries who have ideas on how we can tackle the toughest challenges. So we have 3 stakeholder forums that will be participating in the summit next week: the Civil Society Forum, the Young Americas Forum, and the CEO Summit. The civil society offers independent civil society representatives from all countries of the Americas the opportunity to be able to connect and have direct engagement with government leaders. To engage the hemisphere's youth, we are including young entrepreneurs and business leaders, the Young Americas Business Trust Forum. They organize these forums with young leaders that are focused on really creating a more equitable and sustainable future. Finally, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is organizing the CEO Summit, which has invited diverse business leaders, including small and medium-sized enterprises across the hemisphere, to talk about solutions for a brighter future for the Americas. As we look at ways to strengthen our supply chains regionally, as we see how we can better support entrepreneurs and increase standards of investment, we expect that private sector leaders will be able to demonstrate a deep commitment in harnessing the power of business to build a stronger and more resilient future and help support democracies through equitable and economic growth. These initiatives, as you can imagine, will only improve the livelihood overseas, which really will help improve the livelihood of us here living in the United States. I look forward to continuing the conversation and hearing a little bit from all of you. Let me just remind you that all of you can actually follow what will be happening in the summit next week. We have a LinkedIn page that will be posting. There are certain events that you can actually participate online. We have the Twitter hashtag, which is Summit of the Americas, Cumbre de las Americas. So that will give you a sense of what is happening next week. Thanks again, Armin.
Very sounds like a very exciting summit. And if Samantha, if you could put those links again in the chat room so that people could follow through social media and participate too, right? They'll be able to do that. You're also working, your partner in crime, so to speak, is former Senator Dodd. How has it been working with him with this?
No, he's amazing. You know, I had not met Senator Dodd until he was appointed and I was appointed, and we had a meeting and we immediately connected because we are so aligned. He has been working in the hemisphere for over 30 years. He has these relationships all over the region. And for me, being from South America, we understand that this is a summit. We need to remember, this is not the United States dictating policies or telling other countries what we want them to do. This is a summit that makes possible countries all over our own hemisphere to tell us what they need and what we can do together to face these challenges. So Senator Dodd and I have been very much aligned on all of these issues, and we've had meetings together. He's had his own meetings. I've had my own meetings. We've had a lot of work to do, but it's been very, very positive. He's wonderful.
What is, as an advisor, what has that role been for you? You're definitely tapped because of your impressive background and not only professional interest, but personal interest in Latin America. How has that experience been as far as, and the role of what you are doing and what your role will be at the summit?
You know, I can tell you that it's been incredible for me because it brings all of the work that I've been doing, like you mentioned, for many, many years to this point where I can build that bridge between the countries, the challenges that they're facing all over the hemisphere, which are so close to my heart, and the issues that we face here also in the United States, but ensuring that we are building that platform for discussion. I've had many conversations with members of civil society. One of the best conversations I had, Armin, was when we had a WhatsApp live discussion with over 250 civil society members, Cubans in Cuba, Venezuelans in Venezuela, and others that were directly communicating with me, expressing their concerns on what they're seeing, the backsliding of democracy in their country, the violation of human rights, wanting to make sure that we have that front and center as part of the discussion when we come together next week, which, as you can imagine, democracy is the basis of the summit. It always has been. We signed the Inter-American Democratic Charter back in 2001, so we will be renewing our commitment and ensuring that all countries follow that charter, which is protecting the rule of law, protecting free and fair elections, making sure that there are no violations of human rights. And so that was very powerful for me, being able to have that conversation. But my priority, and in my role as the special advisor, I have been charged with communicating with groups like yourself here in the United States. I want people, Americans in the United States, to understand how this will directly benefit them and why this is so important. In the past, we've seen so many conversations about our relationship with Europe, with the Middle East, with Asia. We need to include our own hemisphere in these very important discussions as they pertain to national security, health, democracy, economy. So I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I'm really looking forward to what happens next week.
Thank you for that. I have a few questions, but I'm going to go to some of the questions that have come up through our listeners. There's some having to do with the economy and some politically. So it's covering a few items here. There's one question about Sherry Dolat-Shaw, who's with the city of San Antonio, who is one of our very proactive board members, engaging us in a lot of programs like this. And we actually hosted a reception with many of the Latin American countries in December. The Ibero-American consul generals from Houston came, and we had several from Chile, Colombia, Ecuador who visited. But the question she has is, what role have the local government leaders, what role are they playing, specifically the mayors of the local governments? How does their voice play a role in the summit?
Yeah, I'm glad that question has been asked, because meaningful change always starts and begins at the local level. And Senator Dodd and myself actually had a conversation with the president of del Banco de Desarrollo from the hemisphere, who is working very closely with different cities and making sure that they have the financing available to actually implement some of these commitments that are going to come out of the summit. So the Summit of the Americas is the launching pad, and then the work begins for at least, and it continues for at least 2 years, to ensure that we have an effective implementation process. There will be a city summit that is currently being organized. The decision of where this summit will take place has not been decided yet, but it will bring together mayors to discuss these political commitments so that they can actually have the resources, the information, and the tools available to make sure that we implement, starting at the local level, right? I mean, change happens from community to community, and having all of these groups together next week, making these agreements on what needs to happen to improve the lives of all of our citizens, then will require a very diligent implementation process. And the city mayors and cities across the hemisphere are going to play an integral part of that.
And so your role and the job of Senator Dodd and those who are part of this does not end after the summit. That's where all the work begins.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a question about Colombia, the elections in Colombia. Someone wants to, both candidates for the Colombian election announced that they will officially recognize the current Venezuelan government and restore diplomatic relations. And what are your thoughts about that?
So I haven't seen that, but let me just say, I have my own personal views about the elections in Colombia, but I think we as Americans need to also remember that we need to respect citizens' choices as they hold their own fair and free elections. We need to protect the process, and we need to, that's one of the most important pillars of democracy, right? Ensuring that people's voices are heard, that they have the power and the right to go to the ballot box and elect their president. So I feel very strongly that we should not be interfering. I've seen certain officials, elected officials here in the United States, saying a little too much. We shouldn't be interfering in other countries' political process. We need to respect the process. The United States stands firm that we recognize Juan Guaido as the interim president. Maduro is an illegitimate president in Venezuela. He has caused an exodus of more than 4 or 5 million Venezuelans. He has created the worst humanitarian crisis here in the hemisphere. So we'll see what their plans are. That has yet to be seen, what Colombia decides to do there.
And it looks like a follow-up to that is that Colombia has legalized the status or announced that they will legalize the status of 1 million Venezuelan refugees, and apparently they're ready to do more. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts about that?
Well, it's incredible what Colombia has done, opening the doors to, I think they've received over 2 million Venezuelans in their country, and they have provided them with education, healthcare, a temporary status. I think that they have discussed a means or a way for them to become legal there in Colombia. We should all learn from that humanity that the Colombian government has shown Venezuelans in the region. I am extremely appreciative of Colombian President Iván Duque for the work that he's done with the Venezuelans coming into his country. Our government has been very much involved in going to the border and looking at the conditions and providing aid through USAID and other federal agencies. One of the bills that we passed when I was there, the bill that I introduced, actually sent resources to Venezuelans that were fleeing that regime and to Colombia to help with resources. So I think that we should all look at what Colombia did and learn some lessons there for migration.
All right, back to the summit, a question about that. Our friend Arnold Vea, is there a report that will be made available at the beginning of the summit reviewing any of the successes or actions from the previous summit that needs to be continued?
That's a good question. I don't know if we will have anything in writing from the previous summit, and I do have members of my team that have a lot of details that I may not. And if you do, maybe somebody in my team who's on the call can answer that question, but we will be providing documents and information on what happens next week and what needs to be implemented following the summit.
All right, let's see. What significant changes or policies have been created as a result of past summits, if any?
Well, actually, one of the great success stories that I love to talk about is this Young Americans Forum is part of the Summit of the Americas, and they provide grants to young Americans that are trying to really solve certain challenges in their own communities. So there's this Guatemalan woman who applied, this young Guatemalan woman who applied for a grant. She received a grant back in 2018, and she was able to increase connectivity in her rural community in Guatemala, bridging that gap of lack of access to the internet. And she's been very successful. And that's something that has come from these summits. And that's something that I think we're going to see again next week. So a lot of great things. You know, unfortunately, the one challenge that I think we've seen is that we're all facing these threats to democratic governance. And this is an opportunity for those who come to LA next week, those governments that are not only coming and willing to attend, but that understand the importance of strengthening the ties of our allies in the region so that we can work together to protect democratic institutions, so that we can provide economic prosperity for our citizens. I think that this really gives us an opportunity to show that these summits are of incredible importance for our hemisphere. Again, I want to remind us that we have other summits with other areas in the globe, you know, with Asia, with Europe. We need to make sure that we can strengthen the one that we have here in the Americas. We have the resources, we have the talent, we have the entrepreneurship, the research, the innovation to make this a very, very strong region in the globe.
All right. Melanie Palmas wants to know, as far as pertaining to the local engagement to the summit, is there a push for and I think you touched upon this, is there a push for bipartisan participation at this time?
We should absolutely have bipartisan participation. I know that actually Senator Dodd is working on that as we speak, and I would assume that hopefully some of the ranking members in the Senate and Foreign Relations Committee in the House will attend the summit. I think it's important. You know, a lot of these issues unfortunately have been politicized, but they shouldn't be political at all. We should all be in agreement that we need to tackle this COVID-19 pandemic, that we need to provide economic prosperity and opportunities for citizens to work on the issue of migration, which is causing so many families to make that choice to leave their family members in their native countries behind because they need to feed their children, because they're fleeing political persecution or political violence. So those issues should not be political, and I'm hoping to see some bipartisan participation.
Okay, there's a comment here with a question. Mexico and Colombia, in addition to some others, are both celebrating bicentennial of the diplomatic relations with the U.S. this year. The Colombian government wants to establish 200 sister cities in the U.S. and are working with Sister Cities International to work towards that goal. Are Sister Cities International represented in the roundtable? There are many opportunities to strengthen the relationship through city partnerships across the region.
I'm not sure. I haven't seen the final list of people that are actually attending from civil society. I don't have that list in front of me, but I can assure you that, and I see the questions coming from Shahrzad again. Shahrzad, I can assure you that cities are an integral part of implementing any sort of commitments from the summit. And please make sure to follow our LinkedIn page where you can find more information on this summit that will be particularly focused around cities across the region. So that you can have information there. And I'm sure San Antonio will want to participate and should participate, and there shouldn't be any reasons why they're not included in that.
Looking at, and please, if you have additional questions, please keep sending them through. And then I have a few here. You know, as far as, I don't know how much you know about Texas, and the USMCA comes up a lot here. We've done a lot of programs with the about the USMCA with our Mexican consulate and the Canadian consul from Dallas. As far as Texas is concerned, and maybe San Antonio, if you know, why is something like the summit so critical to cities like Miami, San Antonio, and all along the border, both north and south?
Yeah, and you know, you just mentioned it, right? San Antonio has very deep ties, trade ties with Mexico and Canada. I know that San Antonio exported $320 million, I think, in goods to Mexico alone, transportation equipment, electronic products, computer products. There are so many opportunities to strengthen trade ties, not only with Mexico and Canada, but with other countries. I think that I've had discussions with different members from the private sector that are really interested in looking at ways that they can actually invest in countries in Latin America to really tackle these supply chain issues that we face. So nearshoring investments. Peru, for example, I'll give you an example, has incredible manufacturing of cotton products in Peru. So this will open doors to provide economic investments from companies in San Antonio that want to do business in Central America, Caribbean, or South America. And the same for those countries. They're very much interested in having discussions on strengthening some of the trade agreements that are already in place, maybe starting some new free trade agreements. All of that is on the table for next week. And if the pandemic has shown anything, is that we are completely interconnected, especially here in the Americas. You know, the border has a line, but people come in and out of that border to do business every single day. I used to live in California. I know what it's like for people that are crossing that border to have meetings in San Diego, and they drive right back. I mean, there are a lot of opportunities for engagement as it pertains to economic prosperity. I always go back to that, because what we all want here in the United States is to make sure that we're working, getting fair pay, that we can feed our families, that we can make it. It's the same dream and aspirations for citizens all over this hemisphere. And if we can do that together in a unified way, I think that we'll be able to face these challenges, the climate crisis, you know, rebuilding our health systems, making sure that people can stay at home to provide for their families in a safe environment. The issue of corruption is another issue that we have been dealing with a lot of these countries. And for many heads of government, corruption, security, those are top priorities. And so that's another area where if we can work closely together to support these governments, it makes it easier for people to live and remain in their native country.
You touched upon the youth component to the summit. We have a vibrant young professionals group here in San Antonio, and many of our councils across the country do, who are very interested and concerned about just the topics that you discussed. Can you elaborate a little bit about the youth forum, and if not for this summit, since it's next week, how can everyday young people be involved, and whether it's the summit or components of the summit, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I would encourage them, and part of the challenge is that, and this is why these conversations are so important, Armin, and you can all help me to spread the word, is that a lot of these young Americans don't even know where to begin, where to start to get information or resources. I would encourage any young American, any young person entering the labor market, who's an entrepreneur, who wants to look at ways that they can get support for their ideas, or to work together with other young Americans, to follow the Young Americans Business Forum. And I would like to ask my members of my team, Caitlin, if you can put that in the chat box somewhere so that we can have Armin spread the word on how they can follow that, get involved, and get more information for participation.
Thank you. And thank you to both Laura and Kate, who have helped with the logistics to get the Congresswoman. I know they work behind the scenes, somewhat like Samantha for us, to make sure that we have a very successful program. So thank you, Kate. And
I wouldn't be able to do any of this without Caitlin and John and Mary and you name it. I have an entire team that's working really hard. I mean, especially now as we're getting ready for the summit next week.
There's a comment here. I hope you like compliments, because they're complimenting you for a very informative program, and appreciate your work and for your service as well.
Thank you.
We have a few more questions coming in at the last minute here. As far as those stakeholders who are not involved or may not be interested, is it too late for them to get involved in the summit?
You can still participate just by logging in and viewing what's happening next week. And I really would encourage everyone to do that as much as possible. So if you do go to the Summit of the Americas LinkedIn page, we will be providing information on how you can log in. Unfortunately, not everybody can be there physically present, but we are enabling people all over the hemisphere to be able to log in online and watch what is going on, especially in the plenary session, which is Thursday, which has all the heads of government there together talking about these political commitments. And then there will be ways that you can remain engaged after the summit. Again, this is the launching pad. People are coming together, putting all these documents together, setting those goals for the next 2 years. Then there's going to be a lot of opportunity for all of you to become much more engaged and participate even in person in some of these conferences, meetings, follow-up summits. And there's Caitlin. Caitlin just sent the, for the youth summit, she just sent the link. And maybe Caitlin can put the LinkedIn page there as well. Thank you, Caitlin.
Appreciate that. Thank you. There's a personal question here, not to scare you, but I think it's one that you touched upon in the beginning and also in your bio, but maybe you could elaborate. What topics that are covered are personally most exciting to you to discuss, and what are specifically your areas of interest when it comes to the Americas?
Oh boy, there's several. There's several, and I think that they're all connected. So the three priorities for me, I would say, is women and girls empowerment in the Americas. We have seen that in order to have a strong democracy, we need to ensure that we protect the civil rights of women and girls all over the world, and they go hand in hand. And that means providing economic empowerment, economic opportunities, strong health systems, making sure that they're sitting at the table so that they can participate in the political process, and not only in the political process, but also those discussions that we're going to be having with the CEOs of the summit. So democracy is key, because if we don't have strong democracies here in the United States and in the Americas, it's much, much more difficult to ensure that women have a voice in the political process, that women's rights are protected, that girls can live in a safe and secure environment where they can follow their dreams. Misinformation is also very close and dear to my heart, because I have seen how misinformation in our country and in the Americas have really caused this radical division in our politics and the way that we relate to one another. The rise in hate, the rise in harassment and political violence, a lot of that has stemmed from very well coordinated misinformation by bad actors, whether domestic or foreign. So we are having discussions with universities, with nonprofit organizations, journalists. How do we protect the free press? How do we protect local media, who has really been faced with lack of resources to even sustain themselves? So we've seen a lot of closures of local newspapers, where most people get their news from local newspapers or local TV stations. So we're having those conversations that goes again hand in hand with ensuring that we protect women as they're targeted more and more. Female journalists are targeted at a much higher rate than male journalists in the Americas. And we protect democratic governance. So you can see how those are all intertwined, and they're very close and dear to my heart.
For that, and there's actually something related to that. I don't know if this is kind of specific. Are there any plans for implementing any major exchange programs for students, either at the college, university, or high school level? I know things like that exist now locally, but is the summit going to address anything about that?
You know, I mean, we do have some universities that are going to be participating, but that definitely happens at the university level for student exchanges and student programs. So if you are interested in that, you should absolutely ask your local city university, your local community college on programs that they participate in, that they can give you information. Some of them do get grant funding for that, but I would start there.
I want to. You brought up democracy and misinformation. How has that impacted? And I'm trying to ask this without asking it politically, but sometimes it's difficult to do that. How much of a negative impact has the election of 2020 had on our relationships with countries in Latin America, particularly those who are saying, well, yeah, you're talking about us, but why don't you look in the mirror?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I can tell you, Armin, that from my discussions with different government leaders and representatives, there is a great desire now that we have a new administration for them to align themselves more closely with the United States. They understand the importance of that. I think that, and both sides have been guilty of the same thing for the past decades. We tend to ignore these countries, right? That's happened under both Republican and Democratic administrations. And I think that's why I'm really excited to see that President Biden is actually putting a focus on the summit and bringing these leaders together. China has been really trying to penetrate the economies of these countries by providing them funding for their infrastructure needs. They were very much on the ground, providing them with vaccines, with their own vaccines, with testing kits, but that comes with a lot of strings attached, and these countries know it, and they would much rather have an alignment with the United States. So this, like I said, and I keep using this word opportunity, we can't miss this opportunity. This is a moment in time where if we can show that working closely together with strong democracies can deliver for citizens, it will strengthen the region. So let's see how it goes. I am optimistic that we'll have really strong attendance next week, and we'll go from there.
Can you spent some time in Congress as the first Latina Democrat representing Florida. Can you give us some insight about some of the inner workings and relationships working across the aisle? You know, we just had a program with Will Hurd, who's from San Antonio, and we had a discussion with him a couple of weeks ago. And are you hopeful with where we are and the divisiveness that we have? Can we, you know, a lot of the people my age and older always relish the time when they say, oh, Tip O'Neill and Reagan would exchange, you know, drinks after debating and whatnot. Maybe it's not, maybe that won't happen, but are you hopeful that something like that will come to fruition anytime soon?
Well, the first thing I can tell you is that, Armin, we can never lose hope, right? I think that apathy is one of the greatest threats to democracy. We have to be optimistic, work towards a better and more transparent government system, making sure that we hold our elected officials accountable from both sides. I've always been of the idea that I really am not interested what party you're in. I'm interested in the issue that I'm talking to you about. And I worked in the university here at FIU in Miami for many years, and I have in Miami a lot of Republican friends. Unfortunately, that party has become more and more radicalized, and that's been a challenge. But you have to keep trying, and you have to keep having these conversations with members from the opposing party, because at the end of the day, they're also parents. They also have children that are going to schools that could be facing another mass shooting. I had success working with some Republican members on issues that affected, you know, issues related to FEMA after hurricanes were really devastating some of our coastal communities here in Florida and also along Louisiana and Texas. I was able to talk to them and have agreements on national flood insurance. I mean, there are certain issues that I was able to get some consensus and agreement on. I hope that we get to a place where, and this is why disinformation is so dangerous, I really hope that we get to a place where we respect one another. We can have opposing views, but still come to the table to find solutions to things that really are just getting worse and worse. The climate crisis being one of them. There is interest from some Republicans, I think, in Washington to talk about how we transition to green energy. Companies are doing that. So I think that they will follow suit. We can't lose hope. We have to keep working on that.
I love that. Yes, that's a great message. There's a question from the University of Texas at San Antonio. Going back to the Young America Forum, what would you say are some ways that staff at higher education institutions can best support students interested in initiatives and programs such as the Young America's Forum, especially that are promoting this participation as a combination of policy, business, and education?
I suspect that colleges that focus on international studies or Latin American studies would have a lot of detail on the Young Americans Forum. As you can imagine, a lot of these large universities have so many different priorities, right? I mean, their main priority is making sure that they're educating their students. But I would imagine that if you go to the foreign exchange program, the Center for Foreign Exchange Studies, the Center for International Studies, that they should have these details on how young Americans can participate there. I would also, you know, I would ask the student body president, I would ask them and reach out and see if they have information on that. That could be a way of actually promoting opportunities for students that are right now in higher education here in the United States to learn more about the Young Americas Forum and get engaged, and maybe even form a club, you know, the Young Americas Club. There are a lot of ways that we can be creative and innovative and get more young Americans involved.
All right, we have been talking to former U.S. Representative Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, Special Advisor to the President for the Summit of the Americas. We also want to thank our board member, Sherry Dolat Shahi, for helping us secure this program. And of course, our friends with Congressman Joaquin Castro's office who have suggested this for us to participate in this program, as well as Ambassador Luis Moreno and John Casey, our board member. And we appreciate the Fulbright Association of San Antonio, who have helped promote this program, the World Affairs Council of Miami. Please make sure you visit us next week at the Holocaust Museum of San Antonio for a program on the history of genocide. Congresswoman, any parting thoughts?
Look, I'm just so happy that I had the opportunity to talk with you, Armin, and all the members of the World Affairs Council of San Antonio. I want to make sure that you all feel like you have a place where you can send us your ideas, send us your questions. You can do it through LinkedIn. You can send me a LinkedIn message. I can try and find out the right place to send you if you're asking for a specific question that I don't have the answer to. Join us next week at the summit. Log in online, follow all the different events that are going to be occurring. This is a great moment for our country. We should be very proud to be able to host this in the United States. There will be follow-up events, and I hope to come soon to San Antonio.
You're welcome anytime, and we'd love to. We have a place here that has some really good arepas called Bilia. I don't know if they compare with Miami, but we would love to welcome you. You know, the greatest gift people can give, in addition to their time and treasure, or their treasure, is time. And Congresswoman, you have given us your time. We really appreciate it. I know you're very busy. You're about to go to California. I want to thank your staff for helping us coordinate this program, and we wish you the best. We appreciate you for your service, and we look forward to seeing you in San Antonio.
Well, thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you.